Welcome back to my Final Fantasy series where we go over the mechanics and main themes continued in the third entry. This is another first time experience for me. Much of it is immediately recognizable. Dwarves, chocobos, and orphans make a return, and most of our travel options are here, and more, along with Cid. And once again, the story focuses around crystals, but in a slightly different way than the first entry. In fact, the themes explored are more relevant than ever for our newest generation. So today, we're re-establishing balance in Final Fantasy III. Major spoilers. Mechanically, this entry mirrors the first. The general levels come back with an implementation of the job system. Jobs allow us to choose the type of parties we do battle with. Each crystal we find bestows new jobs upon us. Some professions were direct upgrades of others with better base stats and abilities, while others seem like they're more geared for more of a one-time use case. So I can respect the ideas here for those that like to constantly switch and play around with all kinds of methods. I personally just stuck with a few classes because I didn't want to feel like I was wasting my time leveling up classes only to realize they'll only ever be subpar or non-viable in the endgame. The world also feels less gamey. To some extent. It's less zigzaggy, so we spend less time traveling through intentionally drawn out caves and winding corridors of castles. You guys remember this needless shit, right? It feels more natural, keeping the pace in a good way. And there's some creative uses of spells in the overworld that add to the sense of fantasy. I really like some of the more creative locales and world building on display here. Speaking of world building, the story begins with a history lesson. Thousands of years ago, an advanced civilization attempted to control the elements, the forces of nature, through the crystals of light, by which they were humbled and caused instability, upsetting the balance, and wreaking havoc across the land. Cities replaced with ruin, the world faced inevitable catastrophe until 4 warriors were granted power by the dark crystals to quell the forces of light and restore harmony. They succeeded, but only after massive casualties. Fast forward to the present, and we meet our characters on the floating continent of the land of the ancients, in which many ruins and relics of the time before reside. An earthquake reveals a cavern, hiding away a crystal of light, in which our orphans discover. They're instructed to go forth and restore balance. This calling takes us across our continent, and with Cid's help, beyond it. The airship conversion was a nice surprise, especially coupled with the ability to leave the floating continent. We're introduced to a much larger world, and a sense of wonder at scale. Albeit kind of empty, the world is now as large as we'd expect. Initially I thought we were confined to the small floating continent, and then we're gonna flesh it out by popping up other buildings or digging holes for underworlds, or neighboring floating continents. They managed to subvert my expectations. We eventually learn about Noah, a powerful magic wielder. Upon his death, he bestows great gifts of power to 3 beings. His apprentices Uni, immortality, and to rule the dreamscape. Doga, immortality and powerful magics, and Zand, just the gift of mortality. He felt slighted by this, as you'd expect. How many of us would prefer immortality? Depending on the version you play, be it 2D or 3D remake, Zand has different motivations. Other versions have him disrupting the balance to stop time so he wouldn't have to fear his eventual demise. This version has him wanting to flood the world and kill everything because he's pissed off about his inevitable death. So he uses the power and knowledge of the ancients, the most civilized of the species, to once again drain the powers of the crystals. This time, the crystals of light. He caused the great earthquake, unleashing the dangers of the world, thus disturbing the balance yet again. There's a lot going on here. We free a kingdom from a scheming advisor, get captured by Gold Ore, a crystal-hoarding hedonist. My man's name is literally Gold Ore. Gold sword. We get intertwined in a civil war in the kingdom of Saronia until a familial struggle is resolved. Gold sword. Consort with powerful beings to stop the impending doom. Okay, what's in this one? Seek out various mythical objects that allow us to continue our adventures. Gold sword, and a few sacrifices are made to ensure our progression. Wyvern claws? Ultimately, it all leads to fighting Zand, after a rallying grand finale, which felt like a true ending to me. Our perishing orphan heroes felt like closing the book, but we end up getting revived by the last bit of juice Uni and Doga possess, and then sent toward the world of darkness, a horribly long and difficult final dungeon. Apparently, Zand is now using the Dark Crystals for one last hurrah, so we enlist the help of the Dark Warriors of 1,000 years ago to weaken Zand for his final defeat. It makes sense that they'd be willing to help, considering they made the same sacrifice, but thank God they stuck around waiting for a few hundred years because he was whooping my ass. With Zand's defeat, balance is restored to the realm, and we get a conclusive ending for all of our characters. The theme of balance refers to that of the ecosystem, living with nature. Final Fantasy III suggests operating in tune with the elements, harnessing only what we need or controlling our population to not overexert what we have available to us. We mustn't forget that we're at the whim of the earth. The forces of nature are vastly beyond our control, and we're only here because the earth allows it. We can persist, as we're quite a resilient species, much like those that persisted on the surface world and floating continent, but it's difficult to thrive without the blessing of the planet, or in this case, the crystals. It's not that the forces of nature desire or want, instead, it's presented as more of a matter of fact, that nature just is this way. Attempting to manipulate it otherwise, for good or ill, upsets that balance and causes calamity. Real-life parallels are similar to that of the oceans, the warming of which leading to harsher hurricanes, a byproduct of fossil fuel consumption, or the decaying of the ozone layer due to mass CO2 pollution. The fix is more forests, but we partake in mass deforestation to satiate an endless hunger for production. Droughts caused by low precipitation, leading to raging wildfires, many of which are simply negligence with disposing of flammable or flaming items. There's a long list of tragedy, directly or indirectly influenced by our collective actions. Here, the game is simply asking us to be mindful. These themes have always been present in many Japanese cultural media, so it's nothing new, but sometimes that message is lost in the noise. Sometimes we can't help but ignore it, because we're caught up in various levels of survival ourselves. So on second thought, immortality doesn't seem so great. So what is there to learn? We can reflect on the impact we cause on the world, our footprint. We understand that larger entities cause many of these issues, but at the individual level, we can champion change. The crystals didn't randomly start going haywire. They could live off the rivers, the wind. It was only after attempts to control nature itself did they have an upset. Now, I don't know what this looks like in real life, so I take it as a metaphor. There is a limit to how much we can take or use before we start seeing consequences. And with everything we already covered, it sometimes feels like we are seeing them. I think these individual efforts to conserve absolve us of responsibility, and we owe it to our future generations to not repeatedly pummel them with cataclysm after cataclysm. I wouldn't consider this intentional malice by us as individuals, but more so a collective carelessness, a disregard of the balance. It's a tale as old as time, evidenced by the history lesson given to us at the start of the game, and the repetition of a new generation having to confront the issues once more. It's only when we start thinking about the great gifts of power bestowed by Noah is where we have to reach a bit. He's described as a great human mage, granting his apprentices responsibility over the caretaking of the world. Uni and Doga, once human, now have immortality and great powers. They offer guidance, and we have to defeat their physical forms for an artifact to progress. But their spirits remain eternal, whereas Zand gets to die with the rest of us. Noah's only connection I've been able to find is his biblical name, and links to floods, of sorts. Zand's preferred method of destruction after he drains the light crystals of their power. And now the Reach. Perhaps there's something to be said about immortals preferring to maintain balance, despite being barely affected. This chick can't even awake to appreciate it. Lacking definitive links, maybe Uni and Doga represent the collective subconscious and consciousness of us, the people of the world. Their immortality represent generations. Regardless to which we belong, we all want for the same thing, a stable and healthy planet to flourish in. Zand's mortality represents our negligence, our collective ignoring of the issues. If we don't act to stop it, the balance will be upset, and this results in massive loss of life. So it's in our best interest, and that of the up-and-coming, to pay special attention to the cumulative, individual effects we have on our surroundings. It's almost as if we can choose whether to enhance or reduce the disasters we face, the potential to upset the balance or preserve it. These themes just urge us to be mindful, that preserving our world, our home, is preserving ourselves. Let me know if you agree with my interpretation. Whatever the case, Final Fantasy III, though light on its story elements and a little drawn out with harsh difficulty curves, is a great entry to the series. The job system is take it or leave it for me, but I still enjoyed the staple turn-based system. The reveal of the main continent and the more creative fantasy elements helped fill the void left by the lacking character development and story. And lastly, the theme of balance, still applicable and strikingly relevant, leaves us with something to consider. It's interesting to reflect on these topics as we've grown with them in our games, and it's remarkable how they impact us differently as we realize the footprints we leave in our world.